Shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahushai, Bahasham Brachak Kudash. Double honors to the elders and the apostles of Great Millstone, and peace and blessings to the elect. And today we're going to go into the book of Isaiah, the 21st chapter. And as you can see in the subheading, God commands that Babylon be taken. Now in this chapter, Isaiah basically prophesies right against a couple of different regions, Babylon being one, right, and then a few on Edom, and then Ishmael, and around that region with Kedar and so on. And in this chapter, it's worded in a, and not in a straightforward way, right? A lot of verses in here are somewhat of dark sayings, but it's mainly applied in prophecy, right? And we'll, as we go through, we'll clarify why that is and what it actually applies to here. So this is the book of Isaiah, chapter 21, verse 1. The burden of the desert of the sea, which here is referring to Babylon. As whirlwinds in the south pass through, so it cometh from the desert, from a terrible land. And what is to say is that this is a foreshadowing of judgment, right? Which is likened on to the destruction that is caused by like a whirlwind. Here Isaiah is saying, right, similar to how you have whirlwinds from the south that pass through and leave a wake of destruction in their path, so will it be in the land of this desert, which is Babylon, right? So it cometh from the desert, from a terrible land. And when we read this in say the maybe NLT, NIV, it says here, NLT, this message came to me concerning Babylon, the desert by the sea. Disaster is roaring down on you from the desert, like a whirlwind sweeping in from the Negev, which I believe that's where they get when they look into the word south. Let's see. Yeah, Nagab. Right, so South Country, otherwise word as Nekeb. Anyway, verse 2. A grievous vision is declared unto me. The treacherous dealer dealeth treacherously, and the spoiler spoileth. Right, so ultimately, who is the spoiler? Right, we're mentioning, right, we're dealing with Babylon, but generally throughout the scriptures, right, this is attributed to Esau, Edom, okay, being the spoiler, and one that deals treacherously. Now, I actually cross-referenced this verse here, and one of the precepts is Isaiah 33:1, right? Woe to thee that spoilest, and thou wast not spoiled, which fits to a T, right? Esau, Edom. And dealest treacherously, and they dealt not treacherously with thee. When thou shalt cease to spoil, thou shalt be spoiled. And when they shall make an end to deal treacherously, when thou shalt make an end to deal treacherously, they shall deal treacherously with thee. Meaning you're going to get a just recompense, right? Similar to what they did to us, right? Israelites, when they came and they rounded up the Israelites in different parts of the world and brought them into captivity. At that point, it wasn't like, there was this major war going on between Israel and Edom. They came there, found them, and then took them captives. Okay, and there's many different accounts of them, of Esau's examples that fit this perfectly. So going back to verse 2, as it mentions here, go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media, all the sighing thereof have I made to cease. Now, there are some similarities in here in this chapter, right, in terms of who was it that actually went up against like the ancient Babylonian Empire, which it was the Persian Empire, right? But that consisted of Persians and Medes. However, as we are seeing, as we will see as we go through this chapter, that it's really more so a prophetic chapter of judgment that would come to Babylon, and we'll see why as we keep on going. When we look in prophecy, right, we know Elam here deals with the Persians, right, which they're also known in the book of Second Esdras 15 as the Carmanians, right? And it mentions in Second Esdras 15 the Carmanians raging in wrath, right? They're going to come forth as a wild boar in the wood, roughly paraphrasing, and that they would destroy a portion of the land of the Assyrians, which is talking about Babylon, or AKA America. So as it mentions here, right, go up, O Elam, besiege, O Media. And Media, um, prophetically, right, we know also as an example, pursuant to Isaiah the 13th chapter, is a trip associated with Russia. Okay, and you can go and watch the Isaiah 13 breakdown. I touched on a little bit as to like the connection between why or how ancient Media, or at least that region, could be associated with Russia today. Not because they are the same people per se, but more so in terms of the geographical location and the inhabitants there, both back then and now. So as this, and we know, right, in prophecy that you are going to have the Persians and you are going to have the Russians that are going to come up against Babylon, right? So it says here, all the sighing thereof have I made to cease. The sighing being the stress or distress that is caused by Babylon is going to be made to cease, because the Lord is going to judge them. And precept, once again, when you cross-reference Isaiah 21 and 2, one of the other precepts here is in Isaiah 13, right? Behold, I will stir up, and this is also a burden against Babylon. Behold, I will stir up the Medes against them, which shall not regard silver, and as for gold, they shall not delight in it. Okay, and when you go back to Isaiah 21 and 2, what's interesting here is the Medes, right, as like an empire or as a kingdom, historically were not the ones that came against Babylon, right? They didn't come and they were allied with Babylon, right? So they sort of ruled in tandem. In fact, Nebuchadnezzar, I think it was his brother-in-law, was a Median, right? Since he had married the daughter of the Median king, Cyaxares, right? So Media, as as an independent, I guess, ruling nation or empire, did not come against Babylon historically. Okay. Verse 3, therefore are my loins filled with pain, right? So here Isaiah is using this vivid imagery to emphasize here how grievous or how terrible this vision is to behold or to endure, right? That's why he uses these words, for example, right? So therefore my loins filled with pain, pangs have taken hold upon me, as the pangs of a woman that travaileth, right? So a woman that is in going through those birth pains, right? In that process, they travail. Okay, when you look into this word travail, it's not a sweet thing per se, right? It says to bear, to bring forth, to bear a child, right? So from the point of contractions to going into labor, that pain and that travailing, right, or that condition that a woman is in is a painful one, and so he's likening this feeling onto that. I was bowed down at the hearing of it. See, so that vision, meaning, and once again, he is emphasizing how grievous or how terrible this vision was, which is why he's wording it this way, right? I was bowed down at the hearing of it. I was dismayed at the seeing of it, being that vision. My heart panted. And when you go into the word panted, it basically goes into like going astray, right? To stagger, of intoxication, wandering of the mind. So it says here, right, to mislead, cause to err mentally or morally. But in other words, what he's saying is his mind was all messed up, right? That's how you would put it in modern day English. Like I had my whole, head messed up or whatnot. So it says here, my heart panted, fearfulness affrighted me, and the night of my pleasure hath he turned into fear unto me. And when you go into reading this, and you'll see I'm often putting this in other translations because the way it's worded is a bit clearer, right? So in NLT it says, my mind reels and my heart races. I longed for evening to come, but now I am terrified of the dark, right? Because of the fearfulness of the vision that he saw or that he received. And most of the time, these visions sometimes would be in the daytime, right? Like I guess you could call it like a daydream. Some more vivid than that, but some would be dreams, right? As even Daniel, for example, he mentions when he woke up, right? When he woke up from this vision, he was affrighted, right? His cogitations troubled him. Um, verse 25 or verse 5, it says, prepare the table, watch in the watchtower, eat, drink, arise, ye princes, and anoint the shield. For thus hath the Lord said unto me. So when you look at this, right, this is happening now, right? But also in ancient Babylon, right before um, um, the Belshazzar got taken out. That's like sort of that imagery that was happening, right? When you read in Daniel 5, you'll get that visual. But also when you read in, I think it's Luke um, 17 and 26, if I'm not mistaken, that they did eat, they did drink, they did give in marriage, right? And we're given in marriage till basically the day the Son of Man, um, or the day that Noah entered into the ark, right? But so shall it be also in the days of the Son of Man. So here in Isaiah 21 and 5, the visual here is while they are preparing the feast, is like preparing the table is like basically setting a feast, right? And then, as it says, watch in the watchtower, because typically you would have people, watchmen over there, watching to make sure everything is all good. And then, as it says, right, eat, drink, arise, ye princes, and anoint the shield. So now there's like this change in tone, right? All of a sudden, now you gotta basically get up and, as it says, anoint the shield. So get ready. Why? Because you're about to be taken over, right? You're about to be hit with a warlike situation. So NLT says here, look, they are preparing a great feast. They are spreading rugs for the people to sit on. Everyone is eating and drinking, but quick, grab your shields and prepare for battle. You are being attacked. So that is to represent like that sudden destruction, right? That would just spring upon you unawares. Verse 6, for thus hath the Lord said unto me, go, set a watchman, let him declare what he seeth. And he saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen and a chariot of asses. So once again, right, this is it's this wording is like not direct, right? Because it's for example, Isaiah is a watchman, right? He is a prophet, but here in this case, the visual is likened onto him setting somebody up to be a watchman, and then that person is seeing these things, and then he's like, okay, what did you see? And then the watchman is giving him that feedback or that information. Nevertheless, the focus point of the vision is what it is that the watchman sees, right, and what that means. So here the Lord tells him, right, go set up a watchman, right, and let him tell you what it is that he seeth. And he saw a chariot with a couple of horsemen, and a chariot of asses, and a chariot of camels, and he hearkened diligently with much heed, right? So when he saw this, he was basically started to like, be on high alert, right? To see, okay, what's going on here? What is this going to come with? And as he was watching as a watchman, and he cried, a lion, my lord, right? Which is to say like a perceived threat. I stand continually. So now the watchman is given the report. I stand continually upon the watchtower in the daytime, and I am set in my ward whole nights. So I'm constantly on watch. And behold, behold, here cometh a chariot of men with a couple of horsemen. And he answered and said, now, this is still the watchman speaking, right? This metaphorical watchman speaking. And when it says, and he answered in ancient English, right, or in ancient world, and he answered, we perceive that as answering is typically preceded with a question, right? Somebody asks you something and you answer. But in the ancient world, sometimes when it says he answered or he went on to say, it's more so just him basically starting another sentence or starting another train of thought or starting another conversation after a brief pause, right? So it doesn't have to necessarily be preceded with a question here. And I say that just to clarify that it's still the same subject. It's still the same watchman here who's speaking. Right? It says here, and he answered and said, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken onto the ground. All right, and this is a very key verse here. One, because this, this wording, this language, we see also used in, I believe it's Revelation 18. Let's cross-reference that. Let's see. Yep, Revelation 18 and 2. Also Revelation 14 and 8. Right, and there followed another angel saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. All right, and similarly in Revelation 18, the same sentiment is echoed, right? Babylon the great is fallen, So as we continue to read here, and as a matter of fact, let's look at this word fallen. All right, Nepal, to fall, of violent death, to overthrow, to cause to fall, right? So as it says here, Babylon is fallen, and all the graven images of her gods he hath broken onto the ground. Now, and this is why it's also important, once again, as we always emphasize, to understand history. When you go back to the time of ancient Babylon, when Babylon was taken over, right, the ancient Babylonian Empire, number one, the empire itself didn't fall, as in it wasn't destroyed, right? It was really just a transition of power from those that were ruling, primarily Belshazzar, which his father Nabonidus wasn't there at the time, right? He was out. When the Achaemenid Empire, right, which Cyrus being the king at that time, had taken over, they basically took out the ruler, being Belshazzar at the time, and then they basically assimilated that region into their domain. And of course, jurisdiction of that region of Babylon was given to Darius the Mede. All right, but the ultimate king of the Persian Empire there was Cyrus. Now, when you read here, right, about how that takeover went, it wasn't like a major war or anything of that sort. And in fact, the opposite here is what happened, right? They didn't actually destroy the idols or the gods of the Babylonians, right? So I typed in here, did Cyrus destroy the idols of Babylon? It says here, no, Cyrus the Great did not destroy the idols of Babylon. In fact, historical accounts suggest he returned many idols to their temples after conquering the city. Cyrus's conquest of Babylon in 539 BCE is well documented, and he is known for his policy of religious tolerance. The Cyrus Cylinder, a Babylonian account of his conquest, explicitly mentions his restoration of statues, that had been removed by the previous king, Nabonidus. These statues were returned to their respective temples, along with their temple personnel, according to World History Encyclopedia. This act of restoration is a key part of Cyrus's legacy as a ruler who respected different religious beliefs. So, when the ancient Persians took over Babylon, as one would think initially when reading verse 2 that this is referring to, because it's the same context from verse 1 on down, right? So you would think that this is referring to the ancient kingdoms of Elam and Media, right, being the Achaemenid Empire, taking down Babylon. But we know that that wouldn't make sense according to verse 9, because one, Babylon, that empire didn't fall. It was just a transition of power. And two, when the ancient Persian Empire or Achaemenid Empire took over, they did not, as we just read here, destroy the graven images or the idols or of the Babylonians. In fact, it was the reverse. And the Babylonians, they accepted Cyrus, right? And now also in terms of scripture, when you read in the book of Bel and the Dragon, The reason it's called Bel and the dragon is because the Bel and the dragon were idols of the Babylonians. And the context of Bel and the dragon is after Darius the Mede died, Cyrus ended up basically gaining that territory back. It was his to begin with, but he had given the dominion over it to Darius the Mede. But the context of Bel and the dragon here is Daniel basically proving to Cyrus that these idols or these gods that the Babylonians worshipped were just idols. And Daniel ends up destroying them, being Bel, right, and also the dragon. And that's why they threw him in the lion's den. So how would this be the case if when the ancient Persians took over, if they actually destroyed those idols, how would we then have this scenario here? All right, and I'm just going to read verse 3. It says, "Now the Babylonians had an idol called Bel, and there were spent upon him every day 12 great measures of fine flour, and 40 sheep, and 6 vessels of wine." Right? So going back to Isaiah 21:9, this is also an indicator to us that here, when it's talking about this Babylon is fallen, this is referring to Babylon the Great, the same Babylon that is mentioned as being fallen in Revelation 14 and Revelation 18. And that makes sense because the graven images and their idols being broken down, that will happen, right? When the Lord brings judgment upon this place. And let me see if we can find some cross references on that. That I'm sure we would have. Let's see, next. I wonder if it's in Revelation 6. Let's see, Revelation. If not, maybe I'll just do a word search on it. Idols. But definitely. Okay, well, this is also one here. Jeremiah 50, right? Which we know Jeremiah 50 is prophetically referring to Babylon. And it mentions here, right? "Declare ye among the nations and publish and set up a standard, publish and conceal not. Say Babylon is taken, Bel is confounded, Merodach is broken in pieces. Her idols are confounded, her images are broken in pieces," right? Which is a part of what's going to happen when this place gets taken over, right? When the Lord brings judgment upon Babylon the Great. And let me start from bottom up. Let's see. All right, well, you get the point, right? There's precepts on that happening. I can't think of a few right now, but Jeremiah 50 is one example there. So going back to Isaiah 21, continuing in verse 10, "O my threshing and the corn of my floor, that which I have heard of the Lord of hosts, the God of Israel, have I declared unto you." So now Isaiah is like basically speaking to Israel here, right? They're the ones likened unto the threshing and the corn of the floor, but in this sense, it's more so of Israel being threshed as being chastised, right? They that are chastened of the Lord. And then he mentions, right, "what I have heard of the Lord." So this vision that I have seen, I've declared unto you, because it wouldn't make sense for Isaiah to be talking to the Babylonians because he wasn't in Babylon, right? He was in Israel and he was prophesying amongst Israelites, right? When he warned them about the judgment that would come upon them and also what would come upon the various nations, as we're seeing here. Verse 11. So now it goes into, right, oracles or really prophecies about Edom and Arabia, which we know in prophecy, Edom is linked with Babylon. But in verse 11 and 12, which really deals with Edom, it's not really much, right? It's not really much said on it, but you can deduce that it's really more so in a symbolic manner, right? So as it says here, the burden of Duma, which when you look that up, it's really associated with Edom, because the next sentence ties that in, right? He calleth to me out of Seir or Seir, and the inhabitants of Seir ultimately came to be the Edomites, right? We know that back in ancient history, prior to the Edomites being in there. I think it was the Horites. See if I can find that. Yeah, patriarch of the Horites, the inhabitants of Edom being the land before the descendants of Esau, the Edomites. But by the time Isaiah was prophesying here, the Edomites had well and long taken over that region. So we know here that this is concerning Esau or the Edomites. So as it says here, he calleth out to me from Seir. So the scene here, the image being painted here is like the East or the Edomites right here are basically inquiring, right? So he calleth out to me from Seir, watchman, what of the night? Watchman, what of the night? The watchman said, the morning cometh, and also the night. If ye will inquire ye, return come. So they're basically asking, like, when is the night going to be over, right? In other words, right? Like this, and the reason why, if not thought of symbolically, it wouldn't really make sense, is when you look at what night represents, right, and what morning or day represents, then it starts to make a bit more sense, right? So when you go into the word night, I believe it's layala, it says here night, but you have here of gloom, right? And in the Strong's definition, it says here figuratively adversity. And there's a scripture, right, that I think is it John, where it says, I must work the works of him that sent me while it is day, for the night cometh when no man can work. So the night is coming for Esau, Edom, right? But as it says here, they're inquiring, what of the night? What of the night? Looking at this in NLT, right, it says here, this message came to me concerning Edom. Someone from Edom keeps calling to me, watchman, how much longer until morning? When will the night be over? Right? And when you look at the word morning, which I think it's also Bakwar, but not my name Bakwar, because there you have those two spellings, right, that mean different things there. But you have here morning, right, break of day, morning, but you also have here of bright joy after night of distress, which is the figurative meaning of it. So when you read this, right, with that in mind, you get the visual here that they're basically inquiring, like, when is this distress or calamity, when is that is brought upon us, when is that going to be over, right? And inquiring of the watchman, when is the morning or the joy or the reprieve going to come? And the watchman says, yeah, the morning is coming, it's pretty much here, but the night is going to come right after. And when you look at that in prophecy in relation to Esau, Edom, you're going to have this period of calamity, right? Jacob's trouble, as Apostle Zahar always mentions, is also going to be Esau's trouble as well. And we know and understand that after that is going to come the joy and the peace, right? The scriptures even talk about joy cometh in the morning, but that joy is going to be for the Israelites. It's going to be that peace, that joy is going to be eternal for the Israelites. But soon after, what are you going to have? You're going to have that night again, or that calamity or distress again upon Esau and the other nations, which is going to be their period of hardcore captivity, right? So there's not any good outlook concerning them. Anyway, continuing in verse 13, it says here, the burden upon Arabia in the forest. So now in the last few verses here, Isaiah then shifts and focuses on the Ishmaelites, right? Predominantly. So it says here, the burden upon Arabia, in the forest of Arabia shall ye lodge, O ye traveling companions of Dedanim, which Dedanim are the inhabitants of Dedan, the inhabitants of the land of Tema, which is all around that region, right? When you look into the word Tema, it says here, desert, the ninth son of Ishmael, the land settled by Tema, the son of Ishmael. So as we continue to read, it says here, the inhabitants of the land of Tema brought water to him that was thirsty, and they prevented with their bread him that fled. And the prevented meaning they met, right, to meet somebody. the reason it uses the word prevented is, one example is if somebody's running and you meet them, you're like, in a literal sense, you stop them, right? So you're almost preventing them from continuing the way they were running towards. And that's what happens when you meet somebody, right? Here, the visual is one that is really fleeing, like a refugee, that you then meet them. Here, as it says, pretty much giving them water, refuge, bread. For they fled from the swords, from the drawn sword, and from the bent bow, and from the grievousness of war. So here, the what Isaiah is saying here, the message here is pretty much, right, that the concerning the Ishmaelites, they would basically be in that state of having to be having to suffer the consequences of like war, right? And you can imagine their regions being those common places of like war zones where you would often have cases where people are displaced, people have to flee to neighboring regions for basically comfort, for help, and that's basically what you're seeing going on here. Now, with the somewhat vagueness of this right here, these are events that happen recurrently in history, right? It's not like just one exact pinpoint in history where this happened once and that's the end of it. So you can sort of imagine this as being like a conditional state that they would be in often, right? And this would be a form of judgment that was seen concerning Ishmael, right, or Arabia. Verse 16, for thus the Lord said unto me, for thus hath the Lord said unto me, within a year, according to the years of an hireling, and all the glory of Kedar shall fail. And I believe when you go into the word Kedar, here we are. It says dark, right, a son of Ishmael. So still dealing with the same subject matter. So as it says, the glory of Kedar shall fail, and the residue of the number of archers, the mighty men of the children of Kedar, shall be diminished, for the Lord God of Israel has spoken it. And the saying of within a year, according to the years of an hireling, right? This is, if we cross-reference this, right, this is mentioned similarly, right, in Isaiah 16, and I think in a few other verses, it also mentions, similar wording here, which, really can be understood as like, this is like of a surety to happen. So less of a more time frame based prophecy, but more so of a surety, right? Because when you deal with like an hireling, if an hireling is hired for a year, that's exactly how long they're going to have to work, and they're going to get their pay for a year's worth, right? Nothing more, nothing less, whether they get paid like daily or whatever their agreement is. But a hireling that is hired to do a job is going to do just that, right? And then that's it. They're not there to do anything less. They're not there to do anything more. And then in verse 17, right, it goes into basically the further pronunciation of judgment against them, more so here of their archers, right, their mighty men being diminished, obviously by way of these wars and judgments the Lord would bring upon them. So that pretty much brings us to the end of the book of Isaiah 21. Lord willing, this is edifying to the elect. In closing, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahasham Yahweh Shai, Bahasham Recha Kudash, and until next time, Shalom.